What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the Adventure Outpost, your hub for all things movie related. In today's adventure, we're going to be diving into all of the movies that I watched for the month of April, and there is a plethora of good movies to get through, so we're not going to waste any time. We're just going to dump right into all that good stuff. We kick the month off with Tetris, a fun, enjoyable romp starring Taron Egerton. It tells the story of the race to license and patent the video game Tetris in the late 1980s during the Cold War. The movie is fun, breezy, and has some super stylistic flair to it in regards to its love of and homage to 80s 8-bit video games that keeps the story fresh and exciting, even with a pretty standard by the numbers screenplay. But this is Taron's movie to shine, and shine he does, continuing to showcase why he is one of Hollywood's best young actors working today. On my flight to Disney, I watched the absolute classic, Catch Me If You Can, my number 6 favorite movie of all time. I could go on and on about my love for this movie. The performances are spectacular. The movie is fun without sacrificing depth for lightheartedness. It's endlessly quotable. It's just a wild ride with a heart of gold as it dives into the broken home dynamic that Spielberg has made such a name for himself in. Seriously, I can't say enough good things about this movie. And talk about young starlets in this movie, just boasting early roles from Amy Adams, Jennifer Garner, Elizabeth Banks, Ellen Pompeo, all of whom would go on to become huge stars in their own right. On the way home from Disney, I watched another feel-good, heartwarming movie, Paddington II, the best kids movie ever made. Seriously, this should be required watching whenever you're feeling down and need a pick-me-up. Paddington Bear, one of the most likable protagonists ever put on film. He is such a heartwarming story, all about community and coming together as neighbors to care and look out for each other. It features a hilarious performance from Hugh Grant as the villain who frames Paddington for robbery and sends him to prison. Yes, this is a prison movie. It's just such a joyous movie that has you grinning from ear to ear, and I dare you not to cry by the final reel. My first theater experience was the Super Mario Bros. Movie, and this was fine. It was about as by the numbers as one would expect, and that's not a knock on this movie. It's exactly as it should have been. It's an enjoyable experience that paid off longtime lovers of Mario, as well as catered to the child demographic Illumination peddles to. The performances are standard, besides Jack Black, who brings the absolute fucking A-game that only Jack Black can, with an absolute barn burner of a song that needs an Oscar nom, I'm calling it right now. But you take away the references and the stellar Bowser performance, this is about as okay a movie as you can hope for. It is so by the numbers and pedestrian that it hurts. But it's not a knock against the movie. That's not a bad thing. It's okay for a movie to be that. This is exactly what this movie needed to be to bring Super Mario to the screen. Now, if we're still doing this for the sequel, then we can start to worry. I rewatched Patriot Games for the first time since I was a kid. And this was another fine movie. It doesn't quite hit the heights of the other Jack Ryan flicks like Red October and Clear and Present Danger, but it's a solid reintroduction to this series with Harrison Ford in the lead. And Ford always brings that gruff bravado to a role that makes even a pedestrian movie worth watching. Sean Bean does his 90s smarmy villain to a T, and there's even a small supporting role from Samuel L. Jackson in there. But Jackson and James Earl Jones are mostly window dressing with not much to do but pop in and out randomly throughout the movie. It meanders and drags a lot in its second act, but the finale at the Ryan household still holds up as a pretty solid action finale. Another movie I hadn't watched since I was a kid, Conan the Destroyer. And dear God, was this so much cheesier than I remember. I loved this movie as a kid. I swore by it as one of the best Schwarzenegger movies. And watching it as an adult, it's hilarious to recognize just how silly our views are of movies as kids and how our tastes develop as we learn more about the world. Which isn't to say I hated this movie, far from it. I still really enjoyed it despite recognizing it as a silly piece of nonsense. The 80s machismo is on full display, with Arnold straight up knocking out a camel at one point, and someone on this movie had an absolute fetish for the man, putting him in basically a wool diaper for practically the entire movie. The best thing going for this, however, is its usage of practical effects and 80s special effects that they may look dated, but they still hold up better and look more realistic to me than any fake-ass computer-generated image Marvel has been putting out the last 5 years. Conan is a great piece of turn-your-brain-off entertainment. Another rewatch was the remake of The Thing, a movie I hadn't seen since I saw it in theaters in film school, and it was fine. It's as good as a prequel to one of the greatest sci-fi horror movies of all time could hope to be. Mary Elizabeth Winstead and Joel Egerton do the best with the material given, and seeing a young Tormund Giantsbane in the movie was an absolute delight. That put a smile on my face. But the movie falls to the same old cliches that bring down so many of these movies, and the CGI creatures are an actual fucking abomination. They look so goddamn bad, and it really just goes to show that practical effects beats CGI every goddamn time. A first time watch, it's Cool Hand Luke. I always love getting to see old movies, especially anything from the 60s. There's something about the aesthetic of this time period on film that just really speaks to me. Just the way everything was filmed just is awesome. And this movie explains so much of why Paul Newman was the fucking man in Hollywood. Just an absolute star-making performance here. He is the coolest of the cool. And that's where this movie flourishes with its actors, because it is not the flashiest of storylines. It's very minimalist, with only a small portion of the movie even being plot-based, with Luke trying to escape prison. It's more episodic in nature, just jumping from random scene to scene, meandering its way to the final scene, which I feel could have been more impactful with a more tightly structured plot, but it's still a really enjoyable movie with a stellar cast. Then I watched Catch Me If You Can again with my fiance, because, of course. The Negotiator was a movie I hadn't seen since I was a kid, and it was on Netflix, so rewatch it we did. And they just don't make action thrillers like these anymore. The 90s is arguably the greatest decade of film, with just so many different genres firing on all cylinders, and action was one of the biggest and baddest. Samuel L. Jackson is a man falsely accused of laundering money from the police pension and killing his partner to cover it up, so he storms Internal Affairs office and takes hostages that he believes are key to helping prove his innocence. And Kevin Spacey is the negotiator brought in to talk him down. And what follows is a great game of wits between two stellar actors, even if one of them is a horrific human being. Spacey. It's a mile-a-minute action blast that never lets up off the gas, and it was loads of fun. My fiance loves speed, so I had to show her the movie that launched all those films. It's Die Hard. An absolute stellar classic action film that gave us the everyman hero against the world, as an everyday Joe must go up against a litany of bad guys and save the day with nothing but his wit and determination. Bruce Willis is picture perfect as John McClane, and Alan Rickman puts in a stellar debut performance. The action holds up, and the movie is so 80s it hurts, but that just adds to its charm with quotable dialogue, gruesome kills, and all the cocaine Ellis could ever want for. The movie is, though, a lot sillier than I remember towards the end, with the introduction of two CIA agents that are legit cartoon characters, spouting off about Nam and acting like they're on cocaine themselves. But, small nitpicks aside, this is an absolute stellar movie. Back to the theater for Renfield, a horror comedy starring Nicholas Hoult as the title character, as he is trying to get himself out of his servitude to Dracula. It's a movie that feels like two movies trying to be one. On one hand, it's a dark, gory tale about one man's lack of self-esteem and confidence as he is taken in by and emotionally assaulted by his mentor, and the lengths he must go to find that beam of self-respect inside him. And the other story is a silly, goofy crime story with Sonic the Hedgehog as the leader of a criminal organization that has the cops under its thumb. It's so stupid. It's too scatterbrained to be truly good, with the movie only excelling anytime Nicholas Hoult and Cage share the screen. The movie would have done well to just cut the crime storyline completely and just focus on the toxic relationship between Dracula and Renfield. Back to the 60s for another first-time watch of The Italian Job, a movie that's fun for about 20 minutes, and unfortunately it's the last 20 minutes. The heist and car chase is thrilling and exciting, but it's just a shame that you had to sit through a boring hour-and-a-half movie to get to that point, effectively being rendered inert by the time the movie gets exciting. Michael Caine is solid as always, but the first half of this movie is painfully slow. Going back even further to the 50s for Rebel Without a Cause. James Dean is phenomenal in this movie, bringing such gravitas to this role and really giving it his all. He acts fucking circles around just about everyone else in this movie. Also, kids were pretty hardcore back in the 50s, having knife fights and horse races to a cliff. These kids went fucking hard. And I was pleasantly surprised to see just how quickly the time flew by on this movie, never wasting a second and pulling you in immediately to the story that you can't take your eyes off the screen. And a large portion of that is thanks to James Dean's performance. Truly a legend taken too soon. Air is a perfect movie showcasing that bygone era of filmmaking that you just don't see anymore. The reliable film. Nothing gonna blow minds or break the bank, but it's an enjoyable storyline telling the tale of a down on its luck company using the last bit of goodwill they have to try and strike their claim at immortality. The cast shine, especially Matt Damon, Jason Bateman, and Viola Davis, as they carry us through this man's last efforts to sign one of the greatest talents of all time and change the game off and on the court. I love movies that make me want to learn more about the subject matter, and Air does just that, building perfectly on the mysticism and mythic aura surrounding Michael Jordan. And now we come to the most divisive movie I watched this month, Beau is Afraid, one of the most what the fuck movies I've ever seen. For some, it's audacious and hellacious. It's an acid trip into one man's mental breakdown of anxiety and trauma suffered at the hands of his mother, and it is all that, but it's also one of the most boring and painful movies I've ever had to sit through. At 3 hours, this movie doesn't do itself any favors as it meanders from point to point, and I mean meanders. Scenes last so much longer than they should, with a fairy tale stage play in the middle of the film being the most egregious, as it just goes on and 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 on. It is pure torture to get through. I can appreciate the artistry on display, as the visuals and cinematography are all top notch, but this is a style of filmmaking that just isn't for me. And that's okay. Different strokes for different folks. Beau killed my high so badly in theaters that I had to come home and watch a comfort movie, Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade, one of the best action-adventure movies ever made, and an amazing finish to one of the best trilogies of all time. And if you don't believe me or don't agree with me, then there's no helping you. You hate movies. Prince of Egypt was a first-time watch for me, a fun, enjoyable telling of the story of Moses and his journey to free his people from slavery. It's a story you've seen countless times before, but the animation is slick with some truly standout shots, and the voice cast all bring their A game. This was a fun movie. My least favorite movie I watched this month, and my least favorite movie for the year, is Ghosted. A pitiful, cliche-ridden, unfunny movie about a stage 5 clinger, played by Chris Evans, who tracks down a girl he spent one night with to London to try and win her heart with some grand romantic gesture. Unbeknownst to him, the girl is a CIA agent on the hunt of some deadly criminals, and he gets roped in. It's the kind of movie that would have played well in the 90s, but the 90s knew how to play it, and this movie sorely does not know how to play it. It's not the witty banter, or the stock beautiful locations, or the bland action choreography. No, movies like this live or die by the characters, and these two are awful. De Armas puts in an entirely unconvincing performance with horribly stilted dialogue, and Evans's stage 5 clinger has no business being in a movie like this, let alone surviving it, fighting back against the criminals, and getting the girl in the end. Absolute bullshit. Everything about this movie screams second rate and direct to streaming, and it's everything I hate about modern blockbuster filming. The Covenant was a fun character study into the lives of the men on both sides stuck in a dirty job during the War on Terror. It's a movie of two halves, the first being the military unit led by Gyllenhaal as they search for weapons of mass destruction and get absolutely decimated by a cartel of infidels. Gyllenhaal is saved by his interpreter and trekked dozens of miles across hostile desert to be brought back to his base. The second half is Gyllenhaal months later going back into this hostile territory to try and find the interpreter and get him and his family out alive before the terrorists find them and kill them both. It's a story of honor and loyalty and the lengths we go through in these horrific situations to take care of each other and help each other make it home to our loved ones. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Quasi is the latest from Broken Lizard, the minds behind some of my favorite comedy films of all time, like Super Troopers, Club Dread, and Beer Fest. But these movies, this ain't. The movie isn't funny in the slightest, and while it looks like at least the guys are having a fun time, no one at home seems to be, and I'm pretty forgiving when it comes to comedy. I'll laugh at the dumbest of jokes, so for me to do no more than giggle a few times is not a good sign. Here's hoping that these guys can turn it around because I love this group, but after Super Troopers 2 and now this, these guys may just be dead in the water. King of New York is a movie I've been meaning to watch for a while. So many people have talked about it being this seminal movie for them, and I don't know what the fuck they are smoking. This movie is absolutely nonsensical, with a plot that is a cartoon with no basis in any sort of reality, which normally is fine. I don't need you to stick to reality. But you need some sort of cohesion. This movie just bounces from scene to scene with ludicrous portraits of gangster violence, with every character being as over the top as fucking possible. Especially the cops on their ass. They are just absolutely so over the top ludicrous. I can't. This movie is truly the pits. Another ludicrous movie, but this one at least had a plot to it, is The Legend of Bagger Vance. This movie just reeks of people trying to win an Oscar with this old mystical tale of the greatest golfer to ever play the game. It has all the hallmarks of what you'd expect a movie vying for an Oscar to do. Sweeping landscape shots, a worn-torn hero, a budding romance, and a skilled actor-director behind the camera. But this movie's juggling of the themes of its era ultimately becomes its undoing. Many things have been said of the magical Negro aspect of this movie, and they are all absolutely true. This movie is absolutely absurd in this regard, that during the turmoil facing African Americans during this period, one would just remove himself from all that and help a white guy with his golf game. It's absurd in a way that Hollywood always excels at being. I legit died when Bagger Vance just appears out of the darkness to help Matt Damon with his swing. Truly, spectacularly, and ignorantly bold. Never change, Hollywood. Billy Wilder is the greatest writer-director of all time, and it's movies like Stalag 17 that prove why. The man just had endless wit that brought his characters to life in ways that you still don't see today, and he always dropped these exuberant characters into these larger-than-life, bleak situations to see how they'd fare. The man is an absolute maestro. If you haven't seen any of the litany of classics that he's made, do yourself a favor and change that, because they are some of the best movies ever made in the history of film. Who Framed Roger Rabbit is one of my all-time favorite movies. Number 8 in my top 10. Its boundless and creative energy make this movie sing like no other. The mixture of live-action and animated characters living together is so unique and interesting, and setting it against the backdrop of a film noir was sheer brilliance. This movie is also dark as shit, with a tune even murdering our main character's brother. This movie isn't afraid to get bleak, and it's that mixture of the dark overtones of the film noir genre and the colorful, zany world of cartoons that makes this movie one of a kind. Awakenings is a drama about Robin Williams as a doctor treating catatonic patients with an experimental drug that brings them back to the world. De Niro is his first patient that comes back to reality from the drug, and their relationship as they each teach each other the beauty of the fleeting moments of our world and how we spend our time in them makes this movie. It's a very restrained performance from Williams, who just may be one of the greatest actors to ever live, as his ability to flip between zany hilarity and quiet, reflective soul-searching in his movies is nothing short of brilliant. Evil Dead Rise is a gore fest of epic proportions worthy of the Evil Dead name. It's violent, stomach-inducing, and tense as all hell. The performance of the main actress, who is taken over by the demon, is fantastic, as she drops insanely quotable dialogue throughout this entire movie. "Mommy's with the maggots now" might be one of the best lines it's dropped all year. It's easily, though, my least favorite Evil Dead movie, but that just goes to show the high quality of every single entry in this franchise, as this is no slouch of a movie and a hell of a good time at the theater. The last weekend of April gave us the 40th anniversary of Return of the Jedi, and you know I had to catch that bad boy on the big screen. Star Wars is one of my favorite franchises of all time, and a chance to get to see one of the original trilogy movies on the big screen was too good to pass up on. It's of course the weakest of the OG trilogy, but there is still a lot to love about this movie. The opening with Jabba, the speed racers on Endor, and the entire finale are all ludicrously fun and gave us a fitting conclusion to what we thought was the ending of this saga. If only. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret may be a mouthful to say, but it's one of the most enjoyable movies I've seen in the theaters so far this year. Effortlessly entertaining as it tells this tale of young womanhood in the 70s as Margaret tries to figure out her place in the world. It's got a fantastic soundtrack with solid performances and a lot of hilarious moments. I was surprised by just how funny this movie turned out to be. It's a great family film with a heartwarming message about coming of age. The finish to my 4-day-long streak of going to the theater came with Sisu, a John Wick-style action bonanza about a Finnish soldier that is the personification of death and his battle with a squad of Nazi soldiers during the Scorched Earth campaign at the end of the Nazi regime. It's a violent bloodbath of epic proportions that's held down by its cartoonish violence and near immortality of its lead. Seriously, some of the things this guy just walks off is comically stupid as the movie goes on. Fight Club's a classic. That's it. That's all I have to say. You've seen it. We've all seen it. It's a classic. Brutal machismo, blood-curdling violence. It's a maddening descent into man's subconscious. A movie that every dude needed a poster of on their wall in college. A movie that indoctrinated a bunch of beta males posing as alphas who completely missed the message of the movie. Star-making performances. It's every bit as violent and ludicrous as you remember. It is a classic of 90s cinema. And I finished the month off with Disney's latest pile of garbage, the live-action remake Peter Pan and Wendy. The live-action remakes make a sin that's far worse than any fake woke outrage people love to levy at these movies, and that it's boring as shit. It does nothing to offer anything unique or exciting about this world, instead just rehashing everything you enjoyed about the animated version, but with none of the colorful splendor or energy. It's bland, lifeless, and as you checking your phone every 5 minutes to see how much longer you have left to suffer. And that's it. That's everything I watched for the month of April. It was a shitload of movies. We really dove into a lot of good stuff there, especially towards the end. A lot of crap in there as well, but hey, that comes with the territory of trying to watch each and every movie that comes out in any given month. Sometimes you're going to watch a turd or two. So I hope you enjoyed this video. There's a new series that I'm hoping to do each month now at the end of the month, where we will dive into everything that I watched for the month, new and old. So be sure to check back at the end of May, beginning of June, when we dive into everything that I watched for the month of May. But as always, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, hit a comment. Let's see all that good stuff you'd like to mention down below. What movies did you watch for the month of April? And I'll see you all in the month of May for the next adventure. You have been you. I have been me. These are the movies that we love so much. And until next time, I'll see you at the movies.